like to welcome all of you. Anupam ji, thank you very much. You are a leader in your own rights. You've been an investor with the Indian Angel Network and continue to guide and lead from NASSCOM to the overall entrepreneurial fraternity, particularly on the product technology and the leadership side. So a very warm welcome, Anupam ji.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahalingam, thank you very much for joining us today. You've been an esteemed investor, a leader in your own rights. You've been the managing director at Tata CIA and more recently at a leader at DHFL, Pramerica. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today and sharing with us your views on mentorship and what it is. Mr. Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. You are yourself, have both been an investor, a leader yourself, managing one of the largest retail groups in Kerala called Popular. And you've been with startups, you've been with individuals, and as I hear, you've had a very successful exit in the recent past in one of the automotive startups as well. So guide us today, sir, share with us on how your mentorship has helped some of the entrepreneurs develop their ecosystems and their businesses. So as the expectation of this discussion today rides, I am Deepshika. I represent Speakin. And sir, may I please open the floor now and set the context for the next 40 minutes in terms of what is mentorship and what exactly is a mentee-mentor relationship according to you. That'll give us a base for the questions and answers that we will have in the second half of the interaction today. So may I please start with Anupam ji. Anupam ji, mentorship is a much prized word today. And it's considered to be the differentiator between an organization that survives and an organization that thrives. What is your view, sir? What, according to you, is mentorship, and what should a mentee-mentor relationship be like to achieve the right goals?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Deepshika. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. So in my opinion, mentor-mentee relationship is basically of trust. And why I say that is that it's not a reporting relationship. It is not something which a mentor, whatever he or she says, is the last word. End of the day, it's typically it is a mentee who takes the initiative to leverage mentors' experience or guidance or whatever mentor would have seen. And that's why you will see typically mentors are the ones who have either been through their own startups or they have experience in particular areas, whether it is technology or go-to-market or pricing models, or and they even get into what the founding team should be, how to do team building. So they're typically mentors are experienced in their own field. Most of the mentors have kind of maybe 20 plus years experience in my kind of mentor groups. And it is primarily from a mentee's viewpoint, it is that they obviously believe what they are doing or startups, what they are doing is kind of everything is correct. But they don't get a very outside view, or maybe sometimes use the word sounding board. And where they can use mentors very effectively is to go and ask anything what is keeping them awake at night or they are finding difficult to do, which typically they are not able to talk to their team members or their family or whatever. I think that's why I said it is a trusted relationship. And then mentors, obviously, based on their experience, they will guide them, they will bounce ideas with them. And what I've seen is most effective mentorship is if mentors ask more questions, because it is not mentors will have answers to all questions of mentees, but I think mentors, based on what they have gone through, they can ask all the right questions, because mentors may not be kind of, expert in the field in which that startup or mentee company is working on. But if they ask right questions, and then they can help, I'll say, tweak the strategy, the go-to-market plan, the investor pitch, okay, which mentee companies are looking at. And last but not the least, for the very early stage startups, mentors help in kind of, providing the right focus. And if you can get a mentor who also can be an investor, then it is, I think, icing on the cake, because then there are stakes of the mentor also in the company. But I don't think it is essential. And so I'll take a pause there and let others share their opinions. And I'm sure then we'll have a lot of Q&A, and we can dive deep into any of these aspects.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, for this phenomenal start and context setting. Suresh, sir, what do you think, sir, is, as per you, what is mentorship and what is a mentee-mentor relationship like?
No, just to add further to what Mr. Anupam said, I think there are a lot of youngsters who are extremely talented, who have lots of ideas, who have taken this route of entrepreneurship and have actually looked at startups in a big way. Now, the issue is there is a level of maturity that one needs to have, and that level of maturity only comes with people who probably have gone through the grind and have gained relevant experience or a lot of experience over a period of time. What the youngsters or the startup people try and balance is to try and relate their core ideas with experience on top of it. Now, experience is something that you cannot get. It's a very, very priced asset. And that is where the role of a mentor-mentee comes into play. So one is trust at one level, there is experience at the other level, and at another level, a lot of optimism and realism needs to be pushed through the founders to make sure that they're not galloping at a speed where it'll derail, but galloping at a speed which is sustainable. And therefore, the role of mentors is to kind of guide, navigate, help these people, move in the right direction. I'm associated with a couple of companies in multiple roles, and the definition of mentor-mentee relationship happens at multiple levels. For example, there is a tech company where the CEO is, and I kind of help the CEO in terms of looking at lines of business and what he does. Now, the discussions that I have with him is not necessarily on business. The discussions that I have with him is in terms of I become the a sounding board for some of his hypotheses, whether it's got to do with people, whether it's got to do with hiring of people, whether it's got to do with some development of people, whether it's got to do with boundaries that he needs to extend in terms of market expansion, and so on and so forth. So it depends on what kind of person that you're interacting with, what kind of a startup it is, at what level is that founder stroke CEO involved, and therefore, how do you draw your experience in terms of helping those organizations? The other thing that I've also learned through the process is just because you are helping and you're in a mentor-mentee kind of relationship, the mentor should not be bombarding with ideas all the time, because then what tends to happen is that the mentee then looks upon the mentor for validating all his hypotheses. In the process, you're not actually developing the guy. The issue comes once the mentee actually does something, succeeds and shares the learnings with you, or fails and shares the learning with you, and that is where you come in and say, maybe you could have looked at it this way, maybe you could have looked at it that way. So I think it's a process of blossoming, and the process of blossoming is a transfer of knowledge, is a transfer of experience, is a transfer of any other contacts and relationships that you can help nurture for the person to eventually grow. That's the way I look at it. And I don't think there is a standard formula. It evolves, and as it evolves, both learn.
Okay. Mr. Paul, the same question. What is your idea, sir, of mentorship, and what is an ideal mentee-mentor relationship like? Sir, you're muted.
I would say if you put it very short, it's a friend and guide. But as both of them had also mentioned this, what I found in mentoring fundamentally is that you shouldn't push what you have, but you should bring them out. You should inspire them to think differently, to work differently, to try out new things. And you just say, have you looked at this, or have you looked at that? Or if they are in a particular bad position, you inspire them to look at different things. You take their thoughts away from what they're actually facing. And see, all this is, it's philosophical also to some extent. It's not just a matter of fact guidance that you give to a mentee. You try to bring their best out of them. In short, I would say that is what a mentor should do. That is, bring the best out of them, inspire them to do whatever they want to do, and try to, not to stick to things that they have just started because for some reason, they went and landed in that. You should try and bring them out their passion for something. And if, at times they may have landed in something and they realize that it doesn't interest them too much. At that time, you must give them the strength to say, okay, leave it, look at something else. Let's try something else. That is the sort of thing. And the strength when they are lost, that is when a mentor can really do some very good things. But on the way, we can always try and bring out a new thought process in them. That's what I would say, in short, what a mentor-mentee relationship should be.
Great. Perfect, sir. Thank you very much for setting the context, all three of you, sir. In the meantime, audiences, if you have questions, please keep sharing them. We'll be spending another 10 minutes on this conversation before we start the Q&A, because this is all about Q&A for answering your specific questions. Meanwhile, sir, allow me to come back to you. Anupam, you mentioned a very interesting point, and I personally seen that in my journey as well. Mentor as an investor, or an investor as a mentor. Do you see a conflict?
I really don't see as a conflict. And where I look at it is that, especially in very early stage startups, if you can have a mentor who is not an investor, but obviously my advice to mentee companies will be, pick the mentors whom you have good chemistry with. And because knowledge and all they have broad knowledge, they have experience, they can guide you, help you the way Suresh and John said. But I think chemistry is very important. You should be able to open up with your the things you want to discuss. I will not call them problems, but whatever things you want to discuss. And but sometimes what happens is those mentors may be able to spend quality time. Sometimes they may not, because but they're kind of, for lack of a better word, they're doing you a favor. But if you have a good chemistry, they are kind of, one is invested in you more as emotionally, then obviously they will give you time. But if you have them also as an investor, even if it is a small check, then they are also looking at getting returns on whatever time they are investing. So to me, it is not essential that the mentor has to be an investor, but it helps if, especially in early stages, because later stages, the check size or the funding requirement becomes much bigger. So typically mentors may not have that kind of a net worth to invest. And really you need mentoring of kind of a real deep mentoring early stages of the company, because once you are off to Series A or Series B, the role of mentors becomes very different.
Absolutely. That brings me to Suresh. So you've been an exceptional mentor, and you talked about your current experiences with some of the organizations as well, and I have personally experienced that as well. What do you think, if for example, when you are invested, there is a natural affiliation to the company, howsoever big or small the investment is. But what if you're not invested in organizations where you do not have the direct incentive towards the success or the failure of the entrepreneur? What is your incentive? Of course, there is a format of paid mentorship. What is your view on that?
Two ways to look at it. One is where you're invested. I think what Mr. Anupam said is very apt. I only like to add there that if you're passionate about the subject or passionate about the industry that you're investing in, and you're a mentor there, it becomes that much more easier because you're aligned to the entire philosophy of the business, and therefore you'll grow with it. Now, a situation where you asked where you're not invested, but you are possibly a mentor, where do you see that going? I don't see much difference because you don't have to be you don't have to be invested in a company to necessarily give value. If that organization sees value in you and you see value in that leadership or that organization, then the role becomes that much more of the same that you would have as you would have invested in a company. Now, the reason I say this is simply because somebody is valuing you for your contribution. You are equally assessing that organization and its growth strategy. And therefore, if you see a perfect fit based on your strengths and your capabilities, and if your chemistry is in line with that organization, then you should go ahead. The question is paid versus unpaid. I think somewhere down the line, if you look at mentorship as a pure, look at it from a commercial angle, then that's a different storyline. I can say for myself, I probably mentor a education loan company. I mentor a tech company. There are some other companies in the AI space that I mentor. I can tell you 75% of these companies that I mentor, I don't even take money. Okay, so therefore, whilst your time is of value, you can monetize it, but if you approach it always from that perspective, sometimes you don't give your best. I'm talking about myself as an individual, and I'm not saying that this necessarily is a true story for everybody, but I feel more confident. I feel more, I feel more satisfied, more fulfilling from my own personal perspective, and therefore I'm able to give the best, which I also monitor to see how the recipient is taking it. So therefore, it's a question of if somebody wants to give you money, then you take it and you keep doing. The fact is, to sum up, if somebody has come to you requesting for a mentorship, 9 out of 10 times, they will pay you something. Paying you something is one thing, but your own willingness to go and help is what matters. And once you have that willingness, things fall into place.
So I would like to come to Mr. Paul here and also come back then again on the same question, because it is extremely important. I think the biggest struggle that entrepreneurs or individuals face, and I'm not just talking about mentorship for entrepreneurs, it is also about leaders who are sitting at the helm of their organization. They're also seeking continued guidance. So how do these people find these mentors? Because, as all of you are saying, it's a bigger emotional decision for you, or a more connect decision for you rather than a financial or a transactional decision for you. Now, because it is not transactional, how do people approach you? For somebody, either you know somebody for years and therefore, you build that connect, but it is impossible to build a connect in one conversation, right? So how do people find mentors? Mr. Paul.
Well, I would say a mentor could be more like a person as a guide, as a friend, rather than like a consultant. Because I think if you don't have the passion to actually mentor somebody, it's very difficult. I don't know how you can do it for money. I mean, I have never gone that scene, but what I'm saying is, it's not that you can't take money, or it's about doing it for money. Okay, you getting money is something else, but if you're doing it for money, I think that works more like a consultant for that expertise rather than as a mentor. A mentor, as I said earlier also, is not a person who has particularly an expertise in the area that he is guiding a mentee. Okay, he may not have, or the chances are that he may not have any expertise in that particular area at all. Okay, I've been sort of mentoring somebody in music education. Okay, I have no idea of music, and the music that I hear is probably only on the radio or whatever. But when you're mentoring a business, it's more than just knowing the specifics of that business. It is on how to guide them to bring out their best, and how to push them to look into every field that bring out their best, to make sure that they have researched everything that they should know about their own business, and then compare them to other businesses in the line. I keep picking up information from the world over, and then I send it to them and say, how do you stand? How do you think like this? And things like that. Okay. So I think that's very different. If it's a consultant, then that person has an expertise in that particular field, and anybody would call him only to consult on that field. Okay. So there's a fundamental difference between a consultant, where you're offering your technical know-how and then you get paid for it. But a mentor, not every consultant can be a good mentor. Because
Right.
I'm saying there should be a passion to mentor somebody. They should have that, what do you call it? The chemistry should go together. They should like to do it. That's very different from a commercial angle. That's what I would like.
Perfect. So what we are hearing, sirs, is that it is more of a connect decision, connect association, rather than a transaction or a financial association. But at the same time, I think in the larger interest of both mentor and the mentee, because it puts pressure on expectations and the investment of time that the mentor is doing, there should be a more calibrated reward both sides, whether it is in a form of equity or it is in the form of advisory shares or sweat equity or the other alternate forms which can help you be more invested. Let me just take a quick pause there and take a couple of questions that have come in. In fact, four or five questions have come in. And Brijesh Gandhi asks, hi, my name is Brijesh. I have a content platform that is migrating text stories to animated, interactive, or gamified. Being a lone founder, how do I scale? Already have over 50,000 downloads and growing. Start to work with the writer community and going good. No to very little revenue. Anupamji, would you like to take that? A lone founder, a very common problem.
Yeah, I can take that. So again, I think you understand your business much better than I do. So, and it's difficult for me to comment on your business potential and all. But as a mentor, I will say one thing, that if you are already facing challenges of scaling and you are a lone founder, I do suggest get another founder. Now, it is not clear whether you are more a business person or you are more technology person, but seems your solution, as it says, is a platform. So it needs to be a scalable platform. So if you are great technology guy, Brijesh, then you should get a person who understands business, finance, and go to market. But if you are the business guy, then go get a very strong technology guy, because for two reasons I'm saying that. One is for a founder, it is a very lonely journey. You need to, and there will be a lot of ups and downs, and these days everything is down and down. And you seem to have a platform, but not much revenue. You are already feeling the pangs of scaling. 50,000 downloads is not that big a number, by the way. It seems like a B2C solution. So that would be my first advice if I'm mentoring based on your question. Rest of the details, very difficult to comment based on what information you have given and the time we have. I don't know if any others want to add something more to it.
No, I fully agree.
I agree.
So lone founder, I think a perfect case for having a mentor. A mentor is the order of the day. Parul Siddiqui asks, it is very difficult to find a mentor for early stage startups when one needs it the most. I'm into edtech and how to find that particular mentor that understands me and then elevates me.
She's into edtech, isn't it?
Edtech, education technology, yes.
Okay. There are enough and more mentors. I'm already mentoring one edtech company based out of Pune, who are doing a lot of stuff on skilling. Okay. Now it's not as if I found them; they found me. The way they found me was through obviously few networks, right? And the point is, you'll have to go through your own personal contacts and through your own friends to see who are few people who are either invested in EdTech or people who are passionate. And once you go through your networks, you start meeting few people, you realize who are the people who can actually help you and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's difficult. You will have to make an effort to, I'm sorry if I can take Deepshika's example here. I'm saying I didn't know Deepshika at all. And it somehow speaking came in, we got interested, few mails, some correspondence, one conversation, and it all came together. So I'm saying you also need a little bit of luck, but a little bit of luck with some persuasive efforts, you will find. And if your proposition is good and you're able to communicate your proposition well to few people, believe me, the word will spread, okay? And you will find a mentor.
Absolutely. So that's how you find value. You reach out and continue the conversation. Don't drop the ball. I think that is very critical. So if I can take example, in fact, I've known Anupam ji, I've known, of course, Mr. Paul and Suresh ji, continuing the conversation, and it's a relationship, as I think Suresh said, you were talking about, it's a relationship that evolves over time. Now, there's a very interesting question which comes from Rajiv, that is there a particular process of helping mentee open up? Because mentees, most of the time, especially when they're talking to leaders who are mentors who are very high up in the ladder, are usually overwhelmed or awed. Anupam ji, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can. So there is really no process, I think I again come back to trust, chemistry. I think if you have those, then there should not be any problem opening up, is how I look at it. And so I don't think there is any process. It is just you hit off well. And I know some places where, okay, after one or two meetings, either mentor did not get enough interested. I think, as Suresh said, mentors also need to enjoy kind of talking to the mentees, right? So it is both ways. It is not one-way communication. So if there is chemistry, there is some value add. And also, by the way, if there is chemistry, but after 2 or 3 meetings, either mentor is not adding value or mentee is not able to derive value, there is no reason to continue that, right? So you can be friends, but you don't have to have mentor-mentee relationship. So don't get bogged down by the process. If you are kind of have trust and chemistry, you will automatically start talking. Otherwise, it won't happen. I think that's how my experience has been.
Exactly.
Great. Johnson, you want to add something to that?
No. Fundamentally, the combination of both. I mean, since you have to go looking out for mentors, you have to keep meeting people. And if you get interested in somebody, then you approach them whether they, for a few things, few ideas. And then slowly you gain trust and you understand that that person can be a mentor to you. And then you try to approach them as a mentor and, pick up that relationship. That's what, I mean, from what both they said, my experience is the same thing.
And Suresh sir, the next question I think you can very easily take. What are the qualities one should look for in a mentor before onboarding them?
What are the good qualities you look at a mentor? Yeah, okay. I mean, I would look for attitude. I would look at the background very clearly. Experience, attitude needs to be communicated in a very, very calibrated manner. Experience and attitude defines the attitude of the person. And once you have that, then the chemistry becomes automatically nice. And once you have these 3 combinations, and fourthly, you should not be a guy who only talks. You should also be a guy who's willing to roll up your sleeves, sit with the mentee, sit with his team, understand the nature of the business, sometimes also unlearn to learn. You just because you have the experience and you have a pedigree doesn't mean you are catch whiskers. You also have to have the humility to say that these are things that I don't know, but these are things I can pick up, but I can guide you based on experience. So I think it's a combination of maturity, humility, experience, attitude, willingness to roll up your sleeves, spend disproportionate time initially, and then spend proportionate time subsequently, and also be ready for any emergencies, calls, opening up doors. It's a full process. If you really look at it, it's like an organizational structure. It's just that you're the boss. I mean, you're not the actual boss, but you're kind of a boss to it, but with the virtues of helping, guiding that guy. So these are some of the qualities that I would look for in the role of a mentor. And what value do you ultimately bring to the fore?
Excellent. And Rajiv asks another question, and I think this is more from a corporate scenario. And so, if you've seen the corporate the coaching areas, sometimes mentorship in a coaching scenario is thrust upon on different seniors as a standard procedure. Are tools usually used to evaluate a mentor, like corporates for a senior being assessed by a junior? I think it's talking more about what are the tools that are available to assess the relationship. And I think that is a big question, which I find even from a B2C perspective, not just from a corporate perspective, that, it's from all that we're talking about, it's still a very intangible relationship. It's very qualitative relationship. How do you bring KPIs? How do you bring in actual matrices at the end of a conversation to say that it has worked or it has not worked? Anupam, do you want to share something on that?
Yeah, I can share that because, by the way, I do a lot of mentoring for NASSCOM as a deep tech club. So this question, we keep on coming up again and again. We have a 4-month curated program, but we try to evaluate whether mentees got value and whether mentors spend quality time. It's very difficult to put KPIs, but I'll tell you my experience. Personally, I look at it, a mentor-mentee relationship works if even after a formal program is over, they still can pick up the phone and talk to each other. Again, it comes back to trust and chemistry. But I think it very non-tangible. I don't think you can put that it worked on a scale of 1 to 10, that you can rank it or rate it. In terms of corporates, since I was with IBM for 14 years, I know they had a very strong mentorship program. So from a corporate viewpoint, I think mentorship is very similar. It helps a lot. And there was a formal way to evaluate how mentors added value to an employee's career growth, all that stuff. So some of those programs I think are very effective, but since I think most of the audience here is startups, I won't elaborate on that. But in large organizations, they have these programs where they encourage these relationships. And I don't think mentorship can be thrust upon anybody. I think it will not work because it cannot be forced. It has to be voluntary.
And I think that is where you also see a lot of, and it's not just the sweet spot. I mean, if it works, it can make a world of a difference in an entrepreneur or a leader's life. But then there are a lot of areas where it doesn't work as well. But then, as you rightly said, you stay friends and you move on. But whether you need it or not, that is very clear that a mentor definitely makes a massive difference to a leader's life, whether as an entrepreneur or as an individual. Now, there's a very interesting question which comes from an anonymous attendee. The attendee asks, what are the thoughts on having multiple mentors for different facets of an entrepreneur? Say one for leadership, one for finance, one for product. Sureshji.
Frankly, it doesn't work. Because it doesn't work. Because a mentor-mentee is a relationship that you have to nurture where you understand both the characters. And in the process of doing that, as long as you're able to spell out what are the gap areas and what you need to do, the fact that you're getting into a mentor kind of a relationship means is an acknowledgement of the fact that here is a guy who can actually contribute to my growth in multiple ways. In my experience, I know the question is not a wrong question, but in my experience, at least from my experience, I can definitely say with my experience in corporates and also my experience with mentoring few startups, it doesn't work because the mentee wants to have a level of comfort and confidence in not with too many people, because the tendency will get confused unless the particular individual is of a different cup of tea and that's his style and that's the way. But in general, it doesn't work. Now, but if there are specific gaps which he feels that a particular mentor is not able to give, cannot contribute, and if the mentor agrees that this is something that he will not be able to help, then possibly it makes sense to kind of look at some external source for some help or whatever. But to have multiple at the same time covering different facets, a difficult proposition as far as I'm concerned.
So there's another question that I've just received on my my WhatsApp. The person asks, so that is Shubham asking, is there a person, what are the tools that you use to evaluate a mentorship, a mentor or the success of a mentorship? I think again, a lot of questions around the KPIs. What is the actual takeaway? It goes back to the same question. Are there any tools that, Suresh, you've seen around which you use?
No, I think first, and I'm sure Anupam can also come in. I think once you get into this process, it's important to get the roles clearly understood and defined, very, very clearly. Why am I here? What do you want from me? And what will you achieve at the end of it all? So it's easy to quantify. So, for example, a startup, I can give an example of a startup in the education loan company, on education loan side. The relationship that I had was, I need for the first 6 months for you to clearly, test my hypothesis, test my process, test my thinking, and tell me whether the plans that I'm putting in is in the right direction. Are there any alternate thoughts? So I want you to measure me from, critiquing me and giving me alternate thoughts. So it's very easy. So as long as the discussion is based on that, then you're fine. But then if you take on the role of saying, this is not right, that is not right, you could have done it this way, no, that is not within the scope. So as long as you stick to that scope, what happens in the process is then you build a chemistry, because even the mentee is looking at you from a fresh perspective. He is also assessing you equally whether you're giving value, whether your value is contributing. Once that happens, chemistry sets in. Then you start looking at higher boundaries. Okay, what are the outputs that could be measured? Output that could be measured is, okay, on a certain milestone, this needs to be achieved. Can you help me achieve that? So if that milestone is achieved, one KPI tick. Okay. Some mentees also require mentors to help them recruit the right people so that the organization structure can be done. So you also help them in finalizing job interviews and so on and so forth. KPI tick. Have you got the right guy? Now you can measure whether the guy has performed to those KPIs in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and so on and so forth, depending on your level of engagement. So it's quite easy. It's a discussion that you need to have across the table and clearly agree and say, these are areas that I will contribute. These are areas we will, at the end of 3 months, 6 months, sit down and discuss whether we have achieved, not achieved. If achieved, fantastic. If not achieved, what do we need to do? That's how you will measure. And now, unlike an organization, you achieve this KPI 1, take KPI, it doesn't necessarily work in those. So it's a mixture of quantity and quality as a measure that you will have to look at it. Remember, at the end of the day, the mentee sees a lot of respect in the mentor, and that's why the mentor-mentee relationship is there. And therefore, you have to give recognition to that qualification. That's the way I would measure it. And at the end of it, agree. If there is disagreement, objectively say what needs to be done.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'll just take this very interesting question which has come. It says, can you have your mentor as a co-founder? Will such a relationship work? Anupamji, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. So, you know, the way I look at it is, I think Suresh talked about the role. Mentor's role is different than a co-founder's role, right? So, co-founder is going to be kind of working with you all the time. Okay, I'm presuming it is a full-time role. Okay, and I think the commitment of a co-founder and the role they play is very different than of a mentor. So, uh, so the way I look at it is co-founders will have chemistry, will have trust, they will talk to each other, but they are much more wedded to each other than a mentor-mentee relationship is. Mentors may not spend more than a couple of hours in a month, depending on, again, the scope or the KPIs which Suresh mentioned. So it's a, like, you know, I don't think there is any comparison between the two. There could be overlaps of the KPIs, but a mentor cannot replace a co-founder, and I don't believe a co-founder can replace a mentor.
Okay,
I agree.
So more practical relationship versus a more functional relationship.
Yeah.
So Anupam, this is also one for you now that you've successfully marketed NASSCOM's program.
What is the question?
The question is, Anupamji shared about NASSCOM's 4-month program. Can you please share more about it? And are there any such other programs for startups?
No, so there are a lot of mentoring programs. I think you just need to get onto the kind of, you know, internet, do some searching around. I know Ministry of Information Technology has it's called, I think, Mighty Startup Hub. So there are mentors listed all over the place, but that may be a very difficult way for you to find a mentor. I think I'll go more with what either Suresh or John mentioned. You need to go with your contacts. And one thing I've seen typically is now LinkedIn is a great tool. So if you know that in your area you need a mentor with this kind of an experience and some kind of, you know, who can add value, then just go to LinkedIn. There is a theory of, you know, 6 degrees of separation. You will always find someone who knows someone, and go and request that person to be kind of, you know, your mentor. But most of these programs, the one I mentioned, they are curated programs, you know, so they do a lot of selection and all that. I don't think just to find a mentor, you have to go through all the kind of, you know, shortlisting and all that stuff. Better ways for you to know people whom you respect, but you don't know, and find a connect to them and get a warm introduction. If you can get a warm introduction, chances are that you will get first meeting. It is the first meeting which will get you second meeting. So it all then depends on how you do that. And if you want to learn more tips, spend some time with Deepshikha. She's very good at finding mentors.
You said it.
Very kind of you. There's another question which is coming, but I think again it is about finding good mentors. With Dr. Sujata talks. She's a professor at Dadi Institute of Engineering and Technology, and asks, how can we find mentors in rural areas or in agriculture areas? How do we find them? They're not so much probably at LinkedIn or some of the other mentor networks. How do I get to difficult areas of mentorship?
Very difficult question. Yeah, John.
You want me to take that question?
Difficult one.
It's a very difficult question. But see, I think the principle of finding a mentor is the same. As we said, you know, you look at your contacts, or you go through contacts. If it's about agriculture, try and find some organization which has something to do with agriculture. Talk to the people over there and find out if there's somebody who's, you know, a little mature and has been doing this for a while. Or it depends on what you want to do in agriculture. If you're just knowing about farming, then you'll have to find somebody about like that. But if you want to do something more than just farming, say exporting your produce, or, you know, finding out which produce to do in which place. I think today, anything that you look at, you should look at in an international venue. You shouldn't look at, you know, when you're starting something today, you should look at scaling, whether this thing will go forward, whether you should not try and limit your market to India or to your city or anything like that. So I'm of the view that I always tell people, do not go by the brick and mortar businesses today. Try and go for what you can do across the internet. And COVID has opened eyes to everything. For example, I've heard of Zoom for quite some time, but it's only recently, or rather this lockdown, that we've really started using Zoom. And in our association, we've started using Zoom 2 or 3 times a day. So when we had to use it. So that way, I think now it's very clear that you try and concentrate on businesses that are worldwide. And so if that's what you want to look for, I think you should find somebody in agriculture also outside your area. You may have to travel to go and meet some person like that, or you may have to use the telephone more often. But I think that's the way to go. You've got to get in touch with the organizations that are in the field of agriculture, try and find people who have retired or somebody who's been there for a while, and see if, and you may have to go through a number of people before you actually find your right mentor.
Absolutely. So,
I can give one more idea to, I think, this question on agriculture. So there are some agri-tech startup kind of, incubators. So that's another place you can look at. And then there is this TIE, which is an organization, the Indus Entrepreneurs. They have chapters in most of the cities in India. It is a global organization. And I know that they have a program where they connect startups to mentors. So that's another one you may like to try. And so there are, this startup ecosystem is very vibrant in India now. So I'm sure you should be able to find a place where you can get connected to mentors.
Great, absolutely. So, so perfect. I think we've just overshot the allocated time, and we already have some requests coming in. Brijesh says that I'm really looking at getting a mentor to scale up platform. Would love to connect with Mr. Mahalingam and everybody else. So I think the journey is starting for some of our audiences as we speak. And Brijesh, we can reconnect after this this call. And then there's another question which comes in, which is again about investment. Can you just take this one last question, if it's okay with the panelists?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a question which says, apart from investment, what are some of the other ways to engage your mentor better, to keep the mentor interested and mentor's interests alive? I think it goes back to what is in it for the mentor. So I think perhaps all of you can give a quick feedback on that in your views. What are you looking for?
No, as long as the business has got a sustainable model, there are innovations, there are lots of new ideas, new thought processes. It keeps you engaged. It gives you the momentum to think differently and out of the box, and you're able to help the team. I mean, the organization or the mentee, in terms of going through the process. As long as there is passion and excitement, and there is a plan and a process that people are following, I think it'll keep the engagement alive. We'll keep the engagement alive, because, like I said before, it is also a process of learning. It is also a process of unlearning to learn. And I think what keeps me going as I involve myself in these mentorship roles is the net analysis. Whilst I've given and contributed, I've also learned equally. And that is what keeps me going as far as all these mentor assignments that one does.
Perfect. Mr. Paul.
So my thing is, as long as I can guide them in leadership, not exactly organization, but how to bring out the best in them. That has always been my interest and my strength. So if there is an area where I can provide that and somebody wants it, I think that would be my best interest.
Fantastic. Anupam ji.
Yeah, I think both John and Suresh has kind of summarized it well. So from my perspective, it is again, mentors will engage if they are enjoying it. I think that's, at least in my opinion, thing, very important, because I strongly believe mentors are not doing this for making money. They are not doing it as a consulting engagement. I think John said that earlier. And they are doing it because they enjoy what they are doing, and founders are interesting. The problem they are solving is interesting. And because it is all interesting, so mentors are also learning while they are sharing ideas. So I don't think it is a one-way thing. It is a two-way. And my only suggestion to mentees or startups will be, come up with some interesting questions, because that will keep mentors engaged. Because if you are not prepared, you're not asking questions, mentors are not going to think questions on your behalf, in my opinion. Okay. And I also do advisory roles, by the way, where there are paid engagements, but that's a very different way of looking at relationship. Mentorship is just enjoying and giving back to the ecosystem. And at least I give back to the ecosystem by talking to startups and mentoring them. So there's a very clear distinction between the two. So mentors are doing it purely for the love of doing it, nothing else.
Great.
So one last thing,
Yes.
Deepshika, to all the attendees, if you really want to find how to find a mentor, I think better than asking the three of us is just ask Deepshika. As I mentioned earlier, she is the one who's an expert at it.
I think the biggest question today, as for particularly in the Indian ecosystem that we see, is how to find a mentor. And clearly a lot of people do not have access and need to be guided more. And this is a conversation we will take forward as we go along, as to giving access to mentors. Thank you very much, sirs, for spending your time here and letting us know of how mutual evolving relationship it is, where there is a bigger gain to be seen for both the entrepreneur as well as the mentor. Thank you very much, sirs, for your time.